Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video episode of Poddywood. I am one of your co-hosts, Steve Hester, and with me, as always, is...
That'll be me, Andrew Roger Carson. Looking really forward to delving into the post-summer release schedule for 1992 of Warner Brothers. And joining us, we can't do a show on Warner Brothers without the former senior vice president himself, Bill Daly. How are you, Bill?
Yes, I'm doing very well. Senior Vice President.
Yes.
Do you realize I had the same title as Jack Warner?
Oh.
No, when Jack Warner was there, he was Senior Vice President. Honest to God.
There you go. Yeah, we can't argue with that, but what we can argue with is some of the movies that came out the year. We had a couple of box office bombs. We had some of the biggest successes, Certified Fresh, Certified Rotten. But we've chosen 5 for this episode that were released from September to December. And obviously, we had some there that was an indie hit, some that was a bit of a box office bomb, and some of them are absolutely huge still to this day. So we're going to start off here with Cameron Crowe's I guess it was kind of an indie darling movie, Singles.
Was that a story about a packet of cheese slices?
Yes, it was. It was a fascinating process, this movie. It was, they were banking on a younger crowd coming in. That there's always this push at the studios there was, I don't know what the post-pandemic world is going to be like, but there was always a push to bring younger audiences into the theaters, get them away from the VCRs and their TV sets and bring them into the theaters. Now it's getting them away from their game consoles and their iPhones. So Singles, and Cameron Crowe always seemed to have his finger on the pulse of what younger people were doing. His experience, as a I think he was a Rolling Stone reporter or something like that. And this movie was before he did Almost Famous, and all that stuff. But he had been quite successful. Yeah, he had been quite successful doing films before Warner Brothers brought him in. And Warner Brothers is always, it's a big studio, so they're always interested in bringing people in that are very good at what they do. And Singles was very different. It had an ensemble cast. I think pretty much the lead, was Bridget Fonda.
Bridget Fonda, Matt Dillon. I'm going to be wrong and probably say not Liv Tyler.
No, you're probably thinking of Empire Records for some reason. I've got it down here.
No, well, it was around that kind of period, and it's that same kind of, I guess, model they were going for. Empire Records is very similar in that respect. I was going to say,
but this was an ensemble cast, and it was exploring single people, and it was shot in Seattle. Seattle was quite the production hub in those days, and it fueled only a little bit by tax incentives. We hadn't fully gotten into the big push for tax incentives yet, but Seattle seemed to be quite the place for everybody to shoot. And right before this, like 3 years earlier, Chicago was the big place everybody wanted to go to shoot. And before that, Florida. Everything seems to go in cycles. And now they have the tax deals. So right now, Georgia and New Mexico are the really big places now. But Singles was, everybody loved the script. I don't think everybody absolutely understood what was going on with it or could visualize it. I know I read the script and I had a hard time visualizing what this was and how these relationships are going to develop, what the different little stories, how they would tie together. And the filmmakers, after they finished shooting it and they did the director's cut and we did previews, and then the studio gave them notes and they went back And this was a process that took over a year. I mean, post-production. They wrapped the movie, and a year later, they were still in post-production. But every time, I mean, the studio, I'm not aware of any kind of push to shut it down, because we've been doing this for too long, you know, which certainly, we did a movie a year before. We did 2 movies a year before. We did, the movie came out, Nothing But Trouble. The original title was Vulcanvania. It was a Dan Aykroyd directed. It was his first directorial thing. Total bomb, total piece of crap, deserved to bomb. You know, but Chevy Chase was still kind of hot then. Taylor Negron had developed a little bit of heat. Demi Moore was really big at the time, you know, on that movie. And I don't mean to give them a whole lot of time, but there was a movie that just took incredibly long to finish in post-production, went through all these different iterations. And I think finally, at the end of the day, as Danny DeVito used to say, you know, art, great art. I don't know that very many of his things qualify as great art, but, you know, great art is never really finished. It's abandoned, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then Defending Your Life, I think was in 1991 as well. And that was another film with Albert Brooks at the helm. He was also in it. But they seem to be doing post-production forever, you know? But, and the point I'm trying to make here, with the exception of Nothing But Trouble, like Defending Your Life and Singles, every time we screened it, there were marked improvements in what we were seeing. You know, the movie was making more sense, and it was getting better and better and better. And you couldn't shut it down. You couldn't abandon it, because you wanted to see how it was going to happen, what was going to happen with it. We should have done documentaries. If I had a time machine, you know, one of the things I would do, besides murdering Donald Trump's parents, is I would go back and I would have a documentary crew follow Albert Brooks and Cameron Crowe through the process of making these movies, because it was fascinating. It was just fascinating to see these projects evolve, you know, and the studio was not constantly harping on them, you know, because I've seen that done too, where the execs like harp on everybody to get it done and get it done, you know. And one way to ensure that a project gets done is you give them another project to do. Suddenly their attention goes on to something else and they've got to finish it, you know. But Singles was just an incredible experience. It really was. And if the people involved in creating that movie were of lesser quality, you know, as people, it wouldn't have been so. But they were just wonderful to work with. Everybody was just wonderful to work with. And the same thing on Defending Your Life, you know. Not to say that Dan Aykroyd and everybody weren't, because they were too. But the material they were working with was just short of the mark that Defending Your Life and Singles were.
Well, that's a very good diplomatic way of putting it.
Very diplomatic.
No, but it's true. But it's true.
Looking at the scores down here on Rotten Tomatoes, just as we did with the last episode, this is probably the most even out of all of the movies that we've talked about so far. You're looking at a 73% audience score and a 79% critic score, registering it certified fresh.
And deservedly so.
Yeah.
Deservedly so.
And it's amazing to me that the critics liked it even more than the audience did, you know, because it was because they tend to be, they try to be sophisticated. I use that expression all the time talking about critics. They try to be sophisticated. And if you look at the root word of how you know, what sophisticated means, you know, one of the definitions is phony. Okay, so not it's a phony definition, but sophisticated equals phony. So so I find myself with a smile on my face going back to that word all the time. You know, they try to impress everybody. So most of them are really, really good writers. I would hate to have that job. I would hate to have to watch the crap that they have to watch. I mean, you're going to see, it's the same thing with my career at Warner Brothers. It was great to do Harry Potter and Lethal Weapon and Batman and Superman and all, these great, great, great movies, The Matrix and all. But there was an awful lot of crap in there. Our business model is 24 movies a year. You're lucky to get 4 really, really, really good ones. You do get some surprising ones. You get some pot boiler ones. You get some really safe moves there, and then you get absolute dribble. Stuff that is only there to fill out the calendar.
I don't know about Jonah Hex. Let's talk about.
But that's how. But no, Jonah Hex started out with the best of intentions. Nobody starts out to make a crappy movie, but it happens. Not everything is going to work out the way. Not everybody is as an effective communicator as others, because that's what this business is in the end. You're communicating, and sometimes people aren't really imparting the message the way it should be, or we're not getting it. It's clear to them what they're saying, but it's not clear to anybody else.
No, good point. Well, in talking about singles here, this film has now kind of become synonymous with the kind of emergence of the grunge music scene. So you had bands like Nirvana, Soundgarden, and this was the first real movie that showcased all of that and kind of risen it up into the mainstream, and that is why it is held in such high regard. Now, apparently,
and Cameron Crowe took this production to Seattle to shoot it.
Yeah,
and that grunge is a Seattle-based movement.
Exactly,
he was in the right place at the right time.
The word online is that Warner Brothers held the film for nearly 9 months, unsure what to do with it, until Nirvana put Seattle on the map.
I don't know that that's entirely true, because they were working the whole time. And as I said, we celebrated a 1-year anniversary, 12 months.
Wow.
And we weren't even finished yet. We weren't even close to being finished yet. And I don't remember from 30 years ago exactly how long that was in post-production, but I do remember the 1-year anniversary of it, because it became a joke. My assistant Elizabeth and I would go to the cutting room and we would tease them about it in a very good-natured way, because we weren't telling them to get it done. I was sorry to see them leave, to tell you the truth. They were such wonderful people.
I think the only person who's going to beat that record is Richard Mirisch on The Flash.
He could be, yeah. And is he
coming up to 2 years, Richard? Come on.
Is he? I hope he's working with a group of wonderful people. I mean, I really don't know. Is he?
And I hope so.
Well, from what I hear, he is. Yeah,
good.
To kind of work on that kind of project and under that amount of pressure.
Well, that's because of the visual effects. I mean, the visual effects are so demanding.
Yeah. And although he is great, he's not told me to think about it, but he keeps saying, wait until you see it. So with him saying that, it's like, okay.
Well, that was like me with The Matrix. There's no way to describe some of this stuff that you're doing, So
one last question on singles. Without the movie Singles, would we even have the TV show Friends? Because apparently Singles was supposed to be a TV series that then morphed into Friends.
Well, Friends is actually a ripoff of a British TV series. So the question on its relationship to Singles would depend on those producers in Britain and whether they were influenced by it. No, the Friends is, like All in the Family was some other British TV show, and I don't know the title. Sanford and Son was Steptoe and Son in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
And The Office, of course, originated in Britain with Ricky Gervais. But but Singles, there was a British version of Singles before, or of Friends, before Friends came on the air.
Really?
I have not heard this one.
No, I haven't even heard that before.
Oh yeah.
was there a TV series called Chums, which I didn't I missed at some point? No, I can't honestly think, because I know that there was lots
And
of
if it was Sky, it would be Old Men, right?
Yeah.
What do you say, old man? Right? No, seriously, Friends. There's a trivia question for you to seek out. I can't tell you the title because I don't know what it is, but I do know that Friends, the idea, it's not that they licensed it. The idea for Friends, in my opinion, it's my true belief that it was, before I slander anybody, my belief is that there was a British TV show that heavily influenced the creation of Friends.
Oh, well, if anyone out there knows, we want to know. Send out the comments.
Marta Kaufman, okay. It's always, she went to school. She's younger than me, but she went to a rival high school of mine.
Getting around to the Halloween period in 1992, we would see Warner Brothers release the vampire movie Innocent Blood.
I love that movie. I love that movie.
Filmed in your native Pittsburgh, I will say.
No, I'm from Philadelphia. It's my native Pennsylvania.
Oh, native Pennsylvania. Okay, fair enough. So with this movie, the first thing I'm going to say here, apparently John Landis was not the original director on it. Apparently it was Jack Shoulder. Is that correct?
Oh man, you're I don't know what to say. I had this really bad attitude about John Landis because of Twilight Zone. And I used to go around all the time. I would say to people, I can't work with John Landis. He kills actors. It's just, I had this bad attitude, never having met him.
This was down to the
but I'm telling you, and I love Jack Shoulder. I've only worked with him on TV things, okay, because he's done TV movies and TV shows. I did TV shows with him, and I love Jack Shoulder. He's really, really good guy, and he's a good director and all that. But if Jack was doing this movie, it never would have gotten finished.
Okay.
We'd be talking about that instead of Singles. Okay. John Landis was absolutely the right guy for this. And John Landis is so nice. He is such a nice guy. I felt so bad about bad-mouthing him before I ever met him. And he really, really is a good guy. And the Twilight Zone is ultimately, I think, his fault. But it's just that it's a tragedy. It in every way, in every possible way, it's a tragedy. And it was they did things in production that they got away with things they would have gotten away with it hadn't it been the tragic circumstances, that helicopter coming down. But if I had to choose, of course this is after the fact. Knowing what I know now, if I had to choose, John Landis absolutely was the right guy to go with it.
So if you ever wonder,
but I love Jack Shoulder. Jack Shoulder would be a great director for your movie. I know you want to direct it, but Deeper Than 6 Feet, Jack Shoulder would do a great job on that.
Sure, I would.
Jack Shoulder sounds like the name of a whiskey.
Yeah, yes.
It does. Yeah.
I have this is the bottle right here. My Jack Shoulder.
Well, apparently, John Landis accepted the role of director on this following a cancelled movie that he was going to do with Joel Silver called Red Sleep, which was a vampire movie about Wayne Newton being a vampire in Las Vegas. Apparently, the movie was scrapped due to both John Landis's movie Oscar bombing at the box office and Joel Silver's Hudson Hawk failure just the year before. Is this true?
Well, I would attribute that's possible. Anything is possible. I didn't realize John Landis did Oscar. And Oscar, I would lay it the doorstep of Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
And Hudson Hawk, I would lay at the doorstep of Bruce Willis.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a soft spot for Oscar.
I've got a bit of a soft spot for both of them movies because they're kind of historic for being what they are. And when you kind of look at them in the kind of time machine and look at them years later, it's like, I'm not turning them off. I'm finding enjoyment from them.
Yeah, these are examples of movies that that I always say should be put into a time capsule, because they reflect a period in ways that that other movies don't. If you wanted to create a time capsule for the early 90s, those are great examples of what people were like, what they dressed like, what the architecture was like, what cars were like, what styles. I mean, both of those movies were made at a time when those actors in those kinds of movies were very, very popular. So they're very indicative of the time period in which they were produced. So they belong in a time capsule, as does Slapshot. Slapshot is a time capsule. If you look at that, I don't know what the ice hockey thing is like in Great Britain, and I was never a huge fan of ice hockey. I don't even know how to skate. I admire them that they can skate and do all that stuff and beat each other up while they're balancing on these little blades. So I admire their ability and their athleticism, but I'm not a huge fan of hockey. I don't get it. I don't like being in the cold. I don't like going to hockey games because I have to take a coat with me, But Slapshot, I mean, aside from being just one of the most hilarious movies you will ever see in your life, is a time capsule of the mid-70s. When you look at the platform shoes they're wearing, and the fake leather jackets, and the double knit polyester suits and everything they're wearing, a rundown town, Johnstown, Pennsylvania is where they shot it, but this rundown industrial town where the factories are leaving and everything. It's and that was a big concern for a lot of people in especially in the Northeast of the United States at that period. So I mean, that movie is a time capsule.
Right, and talking about Innocent Blood, in getting to the point of I guess post-production, Anne Pirillard, I believe that is how you say her name, was a huge hit in La Femme Nikita from Luc Besson, which obviously went on to become Point of No Return, or The Assassin, starring Bridget Fonda, who probably would never make a movie with John Landis, we'll put it that way. Apparently, Anne Pirillard was severely dubbed due to preview audiences not understanding her at all.
Yeah, that was a concern. That was a huge concern, and I don't know how much of her was dubbed. And it was a pity too. I had seen La Femme Nikita, and I was amazed at the transformation. They, not just in the character, but the way that they made her look. I mean, she was so scuzzy in the beginning, and then and so poised and beautiful at the end and everything. And
speaking of which, your cat's just crawled onto the counter behind you.
I see him.
Beautifully poised.
Bill, we can see your pussy.
That's a shame, isn't it?
Well, you can tell that the whiskey's
natural
kicking in.
ginger.
That's his name is Soba. I sometimes call him Buster. I call him Soba more because Buster implies, like, Buster. If a girl calls you Buster, okay. So if you're on a date with a girl and you've only dated her a few times or whatever, okay, and you're making out with her and your hands start to roam, and if she says to you, "Where do you think you're going, Buster?" you know you're not going to score. Okay. Look at him. So he just seemed like a buster to me when we first brought him home. Okay. But he's been eclipsed by this absolute terror right here. This guy is a terror. His real name is Sylvester, but he's known as Corkhead in this house. Anyway,
we're talking
about innocent blood. We're not talking about anybody's pussy here. We're talking about innocent blood.
Innocent blood is well, 38% critics, 45% audience.
Yeah, but you know what? But they don't know what they're talking about. I love this movie. I really do. I don't know why. I can't tell you why I love this movie. It was just it was a great experience with everybody involved in it, and I like how it turned out. It's really surprised me because I don't care for vampire type things. I mean, they don't do anything at all for me. And I haven't revisited this film in quite a long time, but you know, Eddie Murphy did that one, Vampire of Brooklyn or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Is that what it's called? You know, I've revisited that, and I haven't seen it through to the end because I turned it off.
It's just pretty bad.
And you know what would have fixed that movie if it wasn't just a mediocre script and story with this vampire inserted into it. You know, if they'd had a better story to tell, you know, that would be a much better movie. But they just it's missing from the script. I mean, the script is missing.
Yeah.
You know, they took a Kojak episode and inserted Eddie Murphy and all this vampire stuff into it. I mean, honest to God, that's what it is.
That's a pretty good parable, actually. Also missing from Innocent Blood, apparently following its first preview, 15 to 20 minutes of the movie was cut out.
Probably, but they do that all the time, right? You and I personally have had this conversation about 20 minutes too long. Okay.
20 minutes too long. It's the name of our next movie.
That's going to be the name of our next movie. It's going to be a short. And it's going to run 22 minutes. Honest to God, we're not joking. We're going to do this. We are going to do a short film. It's going to run 22 minutes, and we're going to name it. The title will be 20 minutes too long.
Well, unfortunately,
it won't feel like that, though.
No.
Unfortunately, for a movie featuring Robert Loggia, Don Rickles, and a hell of a lot of directors in small roles, as John Landis was known to do. The movie, unfortunately, was a box office bomb, making only $5 million back from its $20 million budget.
That's why John Landis didn't come back, I think. And that's why there was no Innocent Blood 2.
But there was a Beverly Hills Cop 3.
Well, but that was at Paramount, and they struck gold when that was Martin Brest, right? They really struck gold
with the first one,
yeah, but with that, and the cast too. I mean, that cast was perfectly placed.
Yeah, but John Landis, it's going to be interesting to see with Beverly Hills Cop 4. Now, John Ashton has just gone back to LA to do some additional filming on Beverly Hills Cop 4. We cannot wait to see his return to the role that made him famous. And it'll be interesting to see if they've erased Beverly Hills Cop 3 from the canon of Beverly Hills Cop movies, due to the fact that I've never come across a person who liked Beverly Hills Cop 3 at all.
No.
Well, that was a cash grab.
Yeah.
When we were finishing up the last of the Harry Potter films, I don't have this anymore. And maybe it's one of the reasons I'm no longer with Warner Brothers. I made up a fake poster, and it was Harry Potter and the Cash Cow, complete with you saw the buck slip from the Order of the Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
Complete with that typeface and everything. And then because those are two different typefaces. There's the Harry Potter one, which is the lightning bolts, and then the other one is called Lumos. So if you can find fonts, if you can find a place that sells fonts, Lumos is the other one. So when you would see Harry Potter and Goblet of Fire or whatever. So I had those, and I created Harry Potter and the Cash Cow, and I had a cow with rolled up dollar bills being shat out its ass. Okay.
We need to put this on the internet.
Yes.
I
2
don't
weeks
have
later,
it.
Bill was saying goodbye.
I don't have it anymore, but it's like
Well, speaking of stuff being shot out of an ass, I guess we've got to move on to Under Siege.
okay. So what did you say was the budget on Innocent Blood?
Innocent
20
Blood
million?
apparently was a 20 million budget, and it made only 5 million.
Wow, that's not a huge budget. A
No.
huge budget at that time at Warner Brothers would have been 30 to 40 million. 20 million is big, but it's not a huge budget for that studio then.
Yeah, John Landis was saying, because the budget was so small, he had a lot of creative freedom in it. And it's not a bad movie.
It's not. It's really not. And
really
I like
good.
this movie. I really like this movie a lot. I guess they just couldn't find the audience. What was it? What did it come out against?
Oh God, what would be the Halloween movies?
Let me see if I can
92?
find the release date.
I bet you it was Candyman. Candyman came out in 92.
God,
So I
are you
reckon.
fucking kidding me? Candyman would beat this? You gotta be kidding. I'm looking at IMDb right now. I should be looking at Box Office Mojo.
Yes, the more reputable place.
No, it's owned by IMDb. They own Box Office Mojo. Honest to God, I'm not kidding.
Well, you know what? While Steve actually does that, doing his research, we will move into.
All right, then.
Yes.
I'll do the Box Office Mojo.
Yes. So we're going to move into Under Siege here,
Yes.
which is, I think, Steven Seagal's highest rated movie out of everything he has ever done. And one of the only ones with only 2 letters, well, 2 words in its title. Under Siege, which was basically
what's the 2-word title? What's that all about?
Under Siege. Well,
yeah.
Basically, when you look at Steven Seagal's movies, every one of them has 3 words in the title. Apart from the ones, funnily enough, apart from his best ones, which were Executive Decision, which he was in for 20 minutes, and Under Siege. Now, Under Siege was what was very popular at the time, known as the Die Hard clone.
Yes.
So it was, it's Die Hard on a bus, it's Die Hard in an airport, it's Die Hard on a ship in this case.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, the thing that I did notice about Under Siege, this is actually one of the highest grossing movies that was not pre-screened for critics.
Really? I wonder why.
Because it's a Steven Seagal movie. Probably.
No, but we knew when we did that movie, there was an expectation that this was going to be more polished than your typical Steven Seagal fare. Steve, you're on camera. There was we knew that this was not the typical Steven Seagal movie. He had a Class A producer on it in Peter McGregor Scott.
Yeah.
And he had Andy Davis as the director, and Andy Davis, who had a very, very good reputation for action movies that were not the sort of dark, stupid exploitation movies that Steven Seagal was known for, because that's what they are. It's just they're known as Steven Seagal movies because it's like Elvis movies, they're exploitation. Martin and Lewis films, they're exploitation movies. But we knew going in that that there was more substance to this movie, so there was an expectation that it would do better. And the thing was, the studio, Steven actually was a valuable asset to the studio. So the expectation was that this would benefit him and us, to have Andy Davis. Peter McGregor Scott went on to do like a lot of our really, really big movies after this one, Batman and Robin, and before that, the other Joel Schumacher Batman thing, Peter McGregor Scott, those were our important properties. and we put them in charge of it. Made a big announcement with Joel Schumacher coming on, and letting people know that he was in charge of our most important asset. Okay. And then Joel, as only Joel can, said, really? I thought really? It's your most important asset is not Mel Gibson? I'm being put in charge of Mel Gibson. And so it's this, I mean, it was not Saving Private Ryan, but this was closer to like an A-list kind of movie for Steven. And that's why it's his most successful one. He had not that the other directors he worked with were not any good, but I mean, Andy Davis was a guy who really understands this kind of movie. Executive Decision would have done way, way, way better had my wife just got home. She's cuckooing to the cat. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay.
I was wondering how
hold on 1 second.
made
Honey,
Executive Decision better.
you are on the air, so I would advise you not to come back here. No, go right ahead.
So now that we know Executive Decision would have been much better if
put your clothes back on. Put your clothes back on.
Yes. We're talking about Steven Seagal. He's not in the room. You're fine.
Yeah. So, although I have to tell you, I never noticed the 3-word title on Steven Seagal movies. For me, my perception was that every Steven Seagal movie was something where you could say Steven Seagal is. Steven Seagal is, Out for Blood, or Steven Seagal is Above the Law. Steven Seagal is Under Siege. Okay. So we had a title at the studio. We had this title and we were trying to develop at least 6 different movies just for this title, just so we could use this title. Okay. So as we're looking for the right movie to do this with, I come into the big meeting and I go, have you ever noticed that Steven Seagal, all of his movies are Steven Seagal is? It's not like you can't say Sean Connery is Casino Royale. It was Sean Connery is, would be James Bond and everything, but Steven Seagal is Above the Law. Steven Seagal is Marked for Death. Steven Seagal is Under Siege, and Steven Seagal is the big title, Addicted to Love. Okay. That's one of my jokes that went over really well. But it was just an observation. It was just an observation that, all of his movies were something where you could say Steven Seagal is on the poster.
Yeah.
So it never registered for me that they were all 3 words. Except in the case of Under Siege, you could say in. In would be the 3rd word.
I think that also might be why the follow-up didn't really work, because then that's 4 words. Under Siege to Dark Territory, 5 words technically.
Yeah.
But this didn't do too badly. 79% score with the critics, 62% with audiences, which is strange. There's over 50,000 reviews on the audience score, so I would have thought it would be higher. But
he was surrounded by a cast of people, with lesser roles that were, pretty, not all like A-list actors, but close to the top there. Gary Busey, who has starred in movies, but has always been better as a supporting role.
Tommy Lee Jones as well.
Tommy Lee Jones. I was just going to say Tommy Lee Jones was another one that they put in there for him. And then you have your usual cast of characters who always played generals and admirals and police guys. John Mann, you know.
Bernie Casey,
Yeah,
Troy
yeah,
Evans,
you've got,
people like that.
you know, they put him with, they put him together with Andy Davis's list of people that he could bring on to the project. I don't know that the directors that Steven was working with before that could have brought in all these other people to do this movie, you know. And you need to have a really good supporting cast, even if they're people you recognize all the time. You need to have good supporting cast.
Well, this was actually the first time that Steven Seagal worked with a director for the second time, because obviously he'd worked with Andrew Davis on his debut feature Above the Law, released as Nico here in the UK. And apparently Andrew Davis was averse to working with Steven Seagal again in Under Siege, but it was Terry Semel who informed Andrew that Tommy Lee Jones was featured in the movie more than Steven Seagal. So it was more of a Tommy Lee Jones movie. And this obviously ended up with Davis getting the chair for The Fugitive, which then led Tommy Lee Jones to his Oscar. So what do you know about this?
Well, most directors were averse to working with Steven. And it's not because he's some raging asshole or anything like that, because he's not. I know that he has a reputation for, I'm sorry, the whiskey went down the wrong tube here. He has a reputation for hitting on women and stuff, you know, which is a big thing with Me Too right now, and rightly so. And Steven had that reputation even before people cared about that sort of thing. The thing about Steven, though, was that you would present him with a project and a script, and he would immediately rewrite it.
Yes.
So suddenly you've got, you know, story by so-and-so, screenplay by, you know, and that must, especially if you're a writer director, that must be the most annoying thing you can imagine, because now you're sharing not only screen credit, but you're sharing Writers Guild residuals with this guy who hasn't created the characters. All he's doing is redoing dialogue that's more comfortable for him, or action movements that are more comfortable for his sort of style. His particular martial arts thing is Aikido, which is mostly slapping and grabbing and pushing sort of thing. I mean, that's the style. That's what it is. So I can see where if Andy was one of the credited writers of it, I can see where it would be a concern for him. I don't think Steven was ever the kind of guy who held up production, you know, by not coming out of his trailer or anything. I haven't heard. Anything is possible, but I never heard in all the years I was there where he was a problem on the set or this or that or anything. But I would hear complaints all the time about how he wanted to rewrite and he wanted to change the costumes. So you'd put him, and in that movie, in Under Siege, you'll notice he's wearing an apron most of the time, because he was spending too much time at the craft service table. And I am not exaggerating. He was always, if you go back to his early stuff, like Above the Law, he was always kind of jowly, you know, always had this little kind of jowly thing going on. But Under Siege, if you look closely, he's got a double chin almost in there. So they hid him behind an apron a lot. He didn't like the idea that he was wearing the Navy outfits and stuff. So I don't know what's on underneath the apron and all. But and then that became really funny too, because that became one of the kind of funny taglines is, I'm just a cook. I'm just a cook, you know. So, and then on Executive Decision, that was when he was brought on to Executive Decision, that was the first thing. He wanted to change the wardrobe. The guy's supposed to be a fucking Delta Force guy or whatever the hell that, you know, they are. Some sort of special forces. And now they're wearing all black. You know, right? Is that what they're wearing in the, you know? And that's a Steven Seagal thing. It's you know, it's not even original. Johnny Cash was the Man in Black.
Very true. I mean, in looking at Under Siege after all of these years, I mean, obviously, the thing for us, it's always remember Erica Eleniak popping out of the cake.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
When you're a teenage boy, I think that
Yeah.
was pretty much everything in a movie.
yeah,
The
yeah.
real highlight of that movie.
Well, when she popped out of the cake at the premiere, she got a big hand,
I bet
and
she did.
I'm sure there was more than one. I'm sure there was. She felt several.
It was
Sitting in her
probably
chair
the
there.
most damaged section on a VHS tape since
Yes.
Basic Instinct.
No, it's
Yeah.
very true that in the UK, probably in the US as well, the biggest complaint of Under Siege was on VHS in rental stores was that scene was worn out constantly.
Yeah, I can see that.
But
Yeah, I can see
amazingly,
that.
that role originally, Pamela Anderson went to audition with that, and she had basically a casting couch proposition from Steven Seagal saying, and I quote from Pamela Anderson, that if Pamela Anderson didn't do it, the next girl who came into the room would be cast in that part. So,
Well, good thing
Pamela
for
Anderson,
Erica, she came along. I don't doubt that for a minute. I mean, that
Yeah.
it may not be true. It may be true, may not. But you know what? Given everything else that we've heard and seen with Stephen, I wouldn't doubt that for a second. You know, but you never know. You never know. But Pamela already had her sex tape out by then, right? So they probably,
I
Stephen
think that
probably
came
thought,
out afterwards. That was around 95, 96,
oh,
I think.
okay.
It's a few years later.
Yeah, I never had a thing for her. I didn't even know who she was. I had to have somebody explain to me who she was. I didn't even know. She was doing television work and I wasn't
Yeah,
watching.
she
The last
never
thing I
really hit
wanted to do
movies
when I got
until
home.
Barbed Wire.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to do when I got home while working in television was put the TV on.
Yeah.
So I never would have known who was on unless they were on before I, I still knew who Jim Rockford was. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Under Siege was a huge hit, and it was
Yes, it was.
Seagal's biggest hit, obviously leading to his disastrous turn on Saturday Night Live, which has never been repeated, and apparently he's still barred from that show for life. Following that,
Yeah, and some of the stuff I've read about that is just hilarious. Just reading about it is so hilarious, and knowing what I know, not so much that I know, but knowing all the other things that I've heard, it's it's especially funny, And you think they would vet these people better, don't you?
yeah,
A live TV show, don't you think they would vet the people that are coming on to host it?
Well,
Give them the monologue to do and maybe one bit and then out. Don't even, Stephen, you can leave. You don't even have to be here for the finish. We'll finish up at 1 a.m. You can,
I was going to say they probably took one look at the box office gross, which, according to this, just for the USA, was 82.3 million.
Yeah.
Which...
And that was that became a problem for Stephen then, because with this movie, he got a little more legitimacy than he was before that. He was just one of many. Jean-Claude Van Damme and Chuck Norris, he was just one of these many guys that were doing the same thing, the same gig. And but suddenly he and his agents, and everybody had these expectations that, well, the next one will be bigger, and the next one will be bigger, and the next one will be bigger. Okay. But the thing is that Stephen's movies only ever made about $60 million or so, but the thing was that it only cost 10 to make. So if you're making 60 and spending 10, then you're doing pretty damn good, and you can sustain a career doing that sort of thing. So the problem for Stephen was his movies then started to cost $60 million to make. So if you're spending 60 and you're only making 89, you're not making any money. Because the rule of thumb is you need to bring in 2.5 times what you spent in order to show a dime of profit.
Yeah.
And to be honest, 1992 was Seagal's probably best year in the business, I would like to say, because not only did he have Under Siege, over at 20th Century Fox, he had Marked for Death, which is actually a major improvement for a Steven
That's a
Seagal movie.
that's better than anything he ever did at Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Marked for Death. I mean, it's like, wow, Steven has to go to Universal to do that. I mean, Warner Brothers couldn't come up with that. I mean, that was at the time. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
You know, we do all these things with him, and then he goes somewhere else and does this great stuff. You know.
Yeah, and that was Dwight Little who directed that movie.
Yeah,
and it really is. And I play it up to the fact that the villain in that movie was fantastic. Guy by the name of Basil Wallace, who played Screwface, the Jamaican bad guy, who was on another level as a bad guy for a movie.
Yeah.
You know, more than William Forsythe in Out for Justice was. But it was definitely, you know, a great year for Steven Seagal, and I guess it kind of just all went downhill as soon as he did.
And it was, and the thing is, because I know one of the other things you want to talk about is Passenger 57. So we had those in the same year, and so Steven comes out and he does Under Siege, and except that he had this great supporting cast in it, you know, we were all lamenting the fact that Steven wasn't even doing this karate crap, the martial arts stuff. He wasn't even doing that as well as Wesley Snipes was doing in Passenger 57, which was Die Hard on a Plane.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a remarkable thing for us. And that was, I think that might have been one of the things that sort of propelled Wesley into another, a much higher level, was doing that movie.
Definitely.
You know, because he had certainly done well enough with the Spike Lee thing he had done, Jungle Fever. He'd certainly done well enough with that. But then when he moves into Passenger 57 and becomes an action hero, and you could see, even when he's wearing the shirt, you could see this guy was in great shape, and he was much more graceful doing the dance, you know, doing the martial arts stuff. Way more graceful than Steven was doing it, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's move into Passenger 57, actually, because it's a natural segue from Die Hard on a Boat to Die Hard on a Plane. You know, and I think Warner Brothers may be the only studio to actually do two of these Die Hard clones, for a better word, in the same year. Passenger 57, I did go and see this at the theater. And in looking, I hadn't seen it in a number of years. I was kind of shocked to realize that this movie only runs like 80 odd minutes long.
It's really short.
It's barely, really. If it was 10 minutes shorter, it wouldn't qualify as a feature.
It's true. It's
honest
true.
to God, you need to be at least 70 minutes to qualify as a feature.
But originally, apparently,
but I guess that's all they had to say. You know, I guess they had that's all they had to say.
You know? Maybe it's Die Hard on a Plane that also incorporates a fairground for a good portion of a movie.
Yes.
But I guess there was only so much you could do on a plane. But apparently,
now the only complaint I ever heard about this movie was from a friend of mine from London who was bitching that why are all the villains British? You guys are so afraid to take on the Arabs now, and you're so afraid to take on black people, and you're afraid to take on Hispanics. Now, the British now are going to be the villains of the world.
It's because we're so bloody good at it, darling.
Oh, I'd say what was his name? Bruce Payne?
No, there are my Irish relatives who would say, well, it's because, you know, the British really are responsible for all the troubles of the world. Oh, look at the stony faces I'm greeted with.
No, it's true.
It's true.
On the political side, yeah, it's definitely true.
We have a history of being bastards.
But I'll go admit, I mean, this was the first time I'd ever seen Elizabeth Hurley was in this movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know of her before this. And it was the first time I'd ever seen Bruce Payne in a movie. And in this, he is ramping up the Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, God, he is.
To a major high. To the point where he is seriously just enjoying this movie way too much. He really is. But apparently, originally, this was envisioned as a Stallone vehicle for Warner Bros. Is that correct?
I don't know. We had a lot of Stallone stuff around. Like he had done Demolition Man for us, so there was always some sort of Stallone project if we could get him to do it. And I don't know if he was playing the same game that Tom Cruise does at the time, but I suspect several studios probably had a Stallone picture in mind.
Like,
it's like Tom
Stop 'Em, My
Cruise.
Mum Will Shoot at the same year.
Yeah, I know. Okay, now is it me that's breaking up, or one of you guys? I'm hearing.
I
Are you
can hear
hearing
fine.
my voice
I
break
can
up
hear
at
you
all?
fine, Bill.
Yeah, we're hearing you fine.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Andrew, I'm hearing you. Your sound is breaking up sometimes. I keep
How do you
moving to
hear
see
me,
if I
Steve? Is it coming across okay?
Yeah, coming through fine.
That's all that matters.
Okay. Okay, good. The way Tom Cruise does it is that he will engage with several studios at once, and they'll develop a project that he's totally in on. And then he just picks whichever one will suit him at the moment and does it. Meanwhile, all the studios, everyone has put millions into developing a project, and maybe he'll get back to it and maybe not. Like Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Live, Die, whatever, that had been around for a long, long time before it finally got made. It's a wonderful movie. I highly recommend it. We've already talked about that, though, haven't we? Sometime in the past.
We
Okay,
have mentioned this in the past, yeah.
Because I saw the 3D version of it, and the 3D is exquisite, absolutely exquisite. So it may be that Stallone was doing that same thing in his day, when he was in his heyday. I don't know, but there was always a Stallone project around.
Yeah, and unfortunately that year it was Stop 'Em, My Mum Will Shoot, which he classes as the worst thing he's ever done. Also, this Passenger 57 was also offered to Steven Seagal, but he chose Under Siege instead.
That was a smart move. It's a better script. Yeah. I mean, Under Siege is a better script. It's a better movie. Just imagine Under Siege with Wesley Snipes in it. Okay, if like 2 years later, when Wesley Snipes is already a name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Just imagine Under Siege with Wesley Snipes. It would have been a much, much better movie, I think.
Yeah.
Or it would have been LL Cool J in Deep Blue Sea.
Well,
deeper, bluer.
Kill the bitch, keep the bird.
Yeah.
Exactly. Also offered this role, apparently, was Brian Bosworth, our good old friend from Stone Cold.
You know what? I don't know. Well, the thing is, Passenger 57 was a joint venture between us, and I think it might have been Regency. So we were not 100% in control of it, I don't think. So anything is possible, absolutely anything. I have to tell you, I was very pleasantly surprised with this movie. I wasn't paying as much attention to it as I was to Under Siege, because Under Siege, it's not that Under Siege needed the attention as much as like Peter McGregor Scott sort of demanded it, because that was his big movie, and we all loved him. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago, but we all loved Peter McGregor Scott, and we loved working with him and everything. So he tended to get our attention a lot better than most others would have.
Well, this didn't do nearly as well with the critics or the audiences than Under Siege did. You're looking at an audience score of 38 on Rotten Tomatoes. That's, yet again, over 50,000 plus ratings, but 24% on the tomatometer, which means that would qualify yet again for our little what's in the bargain bin extravaganza.
Well, it's a pity, but you know what? But again, I would lay that off on your supporting cast. If they spent more money to get a really good supporting cast on it, not that the people in it didn't excel at their work, but they weren't names that you could sell.
Yeah.
So you had Steven Seagal, plus you had Tommy Lee Jones that you could sell.
Yeah.
And Gary Busey, coming off of Lethal Weapon just a couple of years before, the original Lethal Weapon.
It also didn't do quite as well in the box office, taking roughly about half what Under Siege did with 42.9 million in the USI.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's gained a really big cult following to the point where now, it's one of those movies that when you see on, you will watch it. And the director was Kevin Hooks, who also
and
went
we
on.
loved working with him. We loved Kevin Hooks.
I've heard
really,
good
really great
things
guy to work
from
with.
other people who've worked with Kevin Hooks, and he went on to do a movie with Lawrence Fishburne and Stephen Baldwin a few years later called Fled, which was for MGM, I believe. He also did a movie with Patrick Swayze called Black Dog as well.
I thought for a minute you were going to say Fair Game.
No, that was Andrew Sipes. I don't think Andrew Sipes has ever made anything else in his life, and Steve will find out why next week.
I'm getting quite a bad vibe from this movie.
No, you're gonna love it.
No.
You'll love it.
You haven't been set up. We're not giggling because of that. We are. Have you even seen it, Andrew?
No, that's why I've got to watch it for the next episode.
See, Andrew hasn't seen it either.
I have.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah.
It's just that he's heard backstories from me, and that's why we're giggling. We are giggling over. We can't wait to hear what you have to say about it, and then you will laugh even more when I tell you what I know about it.
Okay. This is all going to be
That's
happening.
what it is.
If you're watching this is all going to be happening on the audio podcast.
The thing is, I haven't seen a single frame of this movie for decades.
Yeah.
Fair Game,
25 years.
I'm talking about. Yeah, for decades. I haven't seen a single frame of this movie for decades. And I don't even vaguely remember what it's about or anything. I just remember some of the other experiences we had trying to make it.
But that is to come. So Passenger 57, are you kind of surprised by its box office? Well, it's kind of box office failure, but it's cult success.
I'm surprised by the poor showing at the box office, but I'm not at all surprised by the cult following, because it is a really, really good movie for what it is. I mean, understanding what it is, it executes the genre very well, and it ticks all the boxes that are necessary for that kind of an action movie. I don't know what it was playing against. Who was its competition when it came out?
I have no idea.
So that might be one of the reasons it didn't do well. No, but yeah, I know. Wouldn't that be funny? But Warner Brothers wouldn't do that. But I mean, if it came out opposite, like Back to the Future 3 or something like that, that would account for it not doing really, really well.
Well, apart from Wesley Snipes, the other person that came out really well from this movie was Tom Sizemore. Tom Sizemore played Sly Del Vecchio, and when you think of the name Sly, this is why I think maybe this was supposed to be a Stallone picture, because that's not a name you just throw in there. But Tom Sizemore, this was the start of his ascent, and it's so sad about Tom Sizemore because he was such a talent. And,
it is, but I remember him in what was the one with Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette at the Safari?
True Romance. That was 93. That was a year later.
Ah, okay. That's where I remember Tom Sizemore. That's where I remember first seeing him, even though he went to my school. He graduated from my school, my school within the university, the Temple University School of Communications and Theater. Although he's a number of years behind me, so I wouldn't have known him. But we know who he is. He's in my school. When I got into the University Hall of Fame, I had to put a reel together, and I included most of my reel was a gag, and the joke never really worked. The joke I was doing were people saying, "I am," "you are." That was their line. "You are this," or "I am," that sort of thing. And most of them were like very quick single cuts of things. But when I got to Heat, I had to include Heat
Yeah,
in that because
of course.
it's a real adrenaline rush. The only other real adrenaline rush in my reel was from The Matrix, when the helicopter is crashing into the building. But with Heat, and then I end the clip from Heat with Al Pacino killing Tom Sizemore. And absolutely nobody at the university got the joke that it was Tom Sizemore. You know?
Brilliant.
One of the things I had in there was, I just saw it recently because I was telling somebody at the university about it. And then I sent them a copy of the reel. One of the things was Daffy Duck from Space Jam saying, "We're the exclusive property of Warner Brothers." And he picks up his tail feathers, and the Warner Brothers logo is scotch taped to his ass, and he kisses it. He kisses his own ass.
Still far better than the sequel.
Oh, God,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, God.
I couldn't
can't even
finish the
think about it.
sequel.
Me
I
neither.
absolutely could not finish the sequel. It was just so,
It was a walking advertisement for HBO Max.
yeah, it was a disappointment. It's not that I didn't see enough of it to seriously be able to say whether it had any quality at all, you know, other than the fact that it was just a huge disappointment to me. And I couldn't, I just,
But
I
you've
couldn't
got
keep my
you've got a
eyes
lot of
open.
love for the original Space Jam. You know, that is a very special film for you. in a way.
That was, you know, but that was a troubled thing too. You know, I mean, I have really mixed feelings about Space Jam. On the, you know, on the one hand, my opinion of I fell in love with the animation people, that the ones that actually finished it, Ron Tipp and Alice Nabate. You know, absolutely, their professionalism and their ability to tell a story, you know, was just like amazing, you know. But Ivan Reitman and his people, my opinion of them just diminished in a really, really big way. So I have really mixed feelings about Space Jam. And that movie cost, it came out around the same time, within a year or so of Waterworld. And Waterworld was excoriated for costing so much money, you know, for the overruns. And let me tell you, I think Space Jam might have actually cost more. The difference is that the budget numbers never got out in the public.
Yeah.
You know, Waterworld was a decent movie and it made over $100 million, which is the usual meter of a big hit. You make over 100 million, you're a big hit. But the thing is that people found out that it cost 125 to 130 to make it. And then they were like, well, that's not up on the screen. Where did all that money go? It's, you know, so,
yeah.
So people were disappointed by that. But Space Jam, it's been more than that.
Well, there's only one way to end Warner Brothers 1992, which was possibly one of the biggest movies that they ever had at the time. Certainly one of the, well, it's still classed as the biggest soundtrack seller of all time.
Yeah.
We have to talk about The Bodyguard.
Yeah, The Bodyguard. Yeah. Oh man,
Oh,
Bodyguard. That was it was a great experience. I mean, it really was. It was exciting. Kevin Costner was riding very, very high still. I mean, he was always The Postman. I think kind of soured people on in a lot of way with for Stephen, and that was for Kevin. But you know, that wasn't until 1997, I think, when we did that movie. I think that came out probably Christmas of '97. Kevin was, and his producing partner were like, everybody loved them on the lot. They were cool to hang out with and stuff. They were doing decent projects. Not everything was great, but they were doing decent projects, and there was prestige attached to working with Kevin Costner and everything. So and then The Bodyguard, and the typical MO for a movie like that is, you know, and it was the same thing with Star is Born. All the different iterations of A Star is Born. You get some hot young singer type, you know. Although Judy Garland wasn't exactly young when she was doing that, but playing much younger than Well, actually, she wasn't that old when she died. She was only in her 40s when she died, but she looked like an old lady. Um, and then Barbara Streisand was the big hot singer thing, and then Lady Gaga. But you know how many iterations there were before they got to Lady Gaga? I mean,
Yeah.
Beyonce was in there, and all these different things. So with The Bodyguard, I'm sure it did go through sort of those things, but Whitney Houston was just so beautiful on top of being a great singing talent. She was
Yeah.
just absolutely gorgeous.
Well, in
And
speaking of that, The Bodyguard was a movie that was apparently pitched and rejected 67 times. And this even was supposed to be a project in the 70s for Steve McQueen and Diana Ross at one point.
that wouldn't work. That
What
wouldn't work.
made this work in 1992? Was it
Kevin
purely
Costner.
Kevin?
Yeah, I would say Kevin more than Whitney, but Whitney was such a revelation. She was a pretty decent actress. And then they gave her a really good supporting cast, like the woman that plays her sister. I don't remember her name, but
Yes.
I had worked with her on a TV thing just 2 years earlier. So when she was on it, and I was telling people, in the in the meetings I was going to, oh, this woman's just wonderful. We had her on this TV show I was doing in Lorimar, and you're going to love her. She's beautiful. She's this and that, and everything. And it worked out. I mean, it was great to be there then. Absolutely, it was great to be there. Kevin was really riding high. We built a gym in my building, the building where I took you through
Yeah.
with Tim Burton's office and all that. They built a gym there for Kevin so that he could stay in shape while, in anticipation of doing that. What they would do is, like with the Arnold movies and the Sylvester Stallone movies, they would put a truck outside, like not a huge tractor trailer, but a truck with, and then have weights. They would create like a little mini gym there with the weights and stuff like that. And they'd go out there and they would just they'd pump themselves up, and then they'd go on the set and they're all like this when they would do that, So, but Kevin's character never really had moments like that, but they did build a gym for him because they thought that somebody who's this hotshot Secret Service guy probably is going to have the cut of a military person, Kevin, so I never once saw Kevin go to that gym. His wife used it a few times, I know, on weekends when I'd be there working weekends. You wouldn't believe how many weekends I put in at Warner Brothers. It breaks my heart to think of how much of my life I put in there, that I didn't need to. But so Kevin's wife was there a lot. And then when that movie was over, they turned it into a virtual reality golf thing for Clint Eastwood. Same space, and it used to be it was a small screening room originally. It was a tiny little screening room. That building had 4 tiny little screening rooms where you could go and look at something, but it wasn't like a huge space. It would be bigger than the space that your big screen is in, Andrew.
Yeah.
But not, it wouldn't seat 90 people. It'd sit maybe 12 or something.
Or it could sit Clint Eastwood if he wanted to go and watch cat videos.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Only a few of us know.
Yeah.
Well, The Bodyguard, for a much loved film, and obviously it was a massive hit with the female demographic, especially around that time. But it is a movie that also has a bit of sad story behind it. A crew driver by the name of Bill Vitagliano had an on-set accident, which resulted in his death.
He was operating a scissor lift with a remote control unit. And what he didn't realize was that it was the same remote control signal that was operating another scissor lift. So he managed, I guess all the dominoes fell in, exactly the right spot, but he managed to crush himself between 2 scissor lifts, not knowing that the second one, the one behind him, was responding to the same commands as the one he was trying to operate. That didn't actually happen on the studio lot, though, because they a lot of that film was shot. I mean, it had local location, and shot stuff, I believe, at the LA Sports Arena, that big thing at the end. But they had rented a warehouse in just south and east of downtown, where there's a warehouse. It's not unusual to take a warehouse and fit it out. We did that with Devil's Advocate, where we had a lot of it was shot in New York, but all the stage stuff was done in a warehouse in Vernon, California, which is a suburb attached to the city of LA. So that actually happened in a warehouse, not on the studio lot. It might have worked out better had it been on the studio lot. You know, it may not have been remote control. It may not have, you know, the safety. There's a lot more attention to safety on the lot because there are a lot more people around to notice if something is about to go awry. You know, it's sad. It's tragic that that these things happen. But I know, like with the Alec Baldwin thing on the movie Rust in New Mexico, you guys don't see the same news that I see on this, but you know, like the New Mexico legislature has had people introducing legislation there, you know, because we got to get these Hollywood people in line. This shit doesn't happen in Hollywood. Gun accidents don't happen in Hollywood. People killed with guns on sets have happened in North Carolina. That you had that camera person operator get killed in Texas and in New Mexico. They do not happen in Hollywood. These fly-by-night productions go to places like New Mexico and Texas and North Carolina and Florida because the rules are more lax. They can get away with shit that they can't get away with here. So I feel insulted that some guy in the legislature is trying to build his own career, you know, on the back of Hollywood when this shit doesn't happen here. They go there because those guys are derelict in what they do. I just stepped off my soapbox, so
no, you know, it needed to be said. It needed to be said. That's the main thing.
Now the Bodyguard. One tidbit on the Bodyguard you may not be aware of is they had hired John Barry to do the score. John Barry was their guy because Kevin and his producing team at TIG were. John had done Dances with Wolves and other projects with them, and he was their guy. He was absolutely their guy. So they did the score. They recorded the score for the movie, and they tested it, and then the cards came back about there were some notes or whatever about the score on it. Well, John Barry had already moved on to do Chaplin, and was knee deep in not just scoring but recording Chaplin. And they asked John to drop that and come back to the Bodyguard, and he refused. He couldn't. I mean, they said at the studio, well, he refused. Well, fuck. I mean, he was doing the same thing on another movie. And it's unfortunate because I'm sure John would have done the changes they wanted to do if he could have. Chaplin, then he got nominated for an Oscar for the score on Chaplin. But then he missed out on the highest selling soundtrack album of all time, you know, with that. But they got Alan Silvestri in to do that score, and he did that whole thing in a matter of days.
Wow.
Honest to God, in a matter of days, did that score, you know. Now the soundtrack is mostly on the weight. It's weighted by Whitney Houston and her stuff, you know. I mean, I'm sure that's the reason for the big success of it. But still, the guy who does the score and produces that CD and everything, they get a big cut of the money. So John Barry missed out, and Alan Silvestri proved what a real pro he is. And the studio's gone back to him many times to do stuff that needed to be fixed or whatever.
Well, that song that just it needs
Dolly
no
Parton.
introduction. The Dolly Parton song,
wrote that. Yeah.
I Will Always Love You. That was at the top of the British chart for
forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
It seemed like the early 90s. Both Kevin Costner movies. You had I Will Always Love You and the one from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. that also spent
Oh
beyond at
yes,
number one.
everything I do for you.
Everything I do, the Brian
Bryan
Adams one.
Adams. Yeah.
And then Love Is All Around from Four Weddings.
Yeah, but Kevin Costner wasn't in that one, so it doesn't
No.
follow the pattern. But yeah, that one as well. But yeah, it seemed like
It could have
every
been.
time you turned on the TV, you turned on the radio.
Well, how about the song that Bill
was
Nye
there.
does at the beginning of Love Actually?
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
I just
Well-
met him last week.
Well, not
Bill
only was the
Nye.
soundtrack a big hit, but the poster was also a big hit.
Yeah.
It's the blue grainy image of
Yeah.
Bruce Willis.
Yeah, we were still in our blue period then. All of our
Yes.
posters, if you go back,
Yeah.
look,
Very
all our
true.
posters are blue. Yeah.
It was still going with Steven Seagal in Exit Wounds, the exact same blue hue on
Yeah.
it. But what some people may not know, and sorry if this ruins the image for any woman out there who bought that poster, the woman Kevin Costner is carrying in that poster is not Whitney Houston. It is
No,
actually
it's
her
not.
double.
Yes. Yes. Because it's in the rain.
Scandalous.
Yeah.
It's raining in there too. Yeah.
So
Well, they
sorry-
sold posters of Steve McQueen jumping the wire in The Great Escape.
Yeah.
There were posters of that, the motorcycle in the air, scaling the wire. And it was really Bud Eakins.
Yeah, very true. Now, apparently the test audiences jeered Whitney's performance. Is this true?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I
Whoever felt.
find it hard to believe. What did you think of her performance?
To be honest, I mean, she was not. I'd never seen her act in anything before, and I've got to admit, when I saw the movie, I think she did a brilliant job in it.
I did too.
Mm.
It depends on who they recruited for it. You know, if people, when they go, sometimes they won't tell you what the movie is. I can't believe they wouldn't have done that with this. Like with Harry Potter, when we did the previews for Harry Potter, we did not tell people what they were seeing, just that they were seeing a kid-related thing, that they were looking for families, they were looking for young kids, and they wanted adults too, sort of thing. And the first couple of films, we actually did screenings with mostly kids, and then later on in the same day we'd do more adult people. But they did not tell people what Harry Potter was because there was so much anticipation about those movies. They didn't think they'd get a real score from it. They wanted to, and none of those films actually scored well. When you look at how the scoring system would go on the previews, none of the Potters did what I would consider to be a good score. I mean, they were scoring in the 60s. You know,
Funnily
and
enough, that
pardon
is
me?
where, funnily enough, the 60s is where the audience score is hit with this. 64% audience score for The Bodyguard, 38% for the critics.
But you're looking at a finished product. This is
Mm.
after it's all been finished. When we were scoring, when we gave audiences scorecards that we could tabulate to see what the reaction was, the Harry Potter films didn't do well. Most of the visual effects were not in there. I get it that people didn't understand, even though we would explain to them ahead of time. This is unfinished. You're going to see stuff, especially the visual effects, especially Quidditch. It's not even close to being finished, but we have to show you a little bit of like what the concept work is, just so you know where it fits in. It wouldn't do for us to pull it out of the movie altogether. We have to show you the really rough stuff. And my brother, exactly my age, my twin brother, went to one or two of those. I remember the first one he went to was The Prisoner of Azkaban, and because he happened to be in Chicago when we were screening it, so I invited him to come. And I know afterward he with this really serious face. You're not putting it out like this, are you? And I said, no. Didn't you listen to the announcement at the beginning? So I have to, and he's an intelligent person, so I have to believe that if he didn't quite get that disclaimer at the beginning, then that's probably what the problem was with a lot of other people. The big thing with Harry Potter, though, was we couldn't tell people what it was because everybody wanted to see those movies. Whatever kind of glimpse they could get, just like the Batman, people sneaking cameras onto the sets. Everybody wanted to see what the costumes looked like and everything. This is where the publicity machine sort of is working against you, you know. But I'll tell you, when they would make the announcement, and I witnessed this 8 different times over 10 years, when they would say, well, welcome to the screening. We're so happy to see you here. The movie you're about to see is Harry Potter, and, 8 different iterations of that. And you would think that Paul McCartney just walked out onto the stage. The crowds went crazy, absolutely crazy. But we couldn't tell them that's what they were going to see, because you didn't have enough seats to satisfy all the people that wanted to see it. And if somebody was going to such great lengths to see it, then the scores are skewed. We couldn't successfully do previews on the studio lot, because the fact that people were on the studio lot tended to rate the scores tended to be higher, because they were so impressed with the facility that I'm at Warner Brothers, I'm doing it, I mean, it's bullshit, but that's what happens. That's how people would react to that sort of stuff. So you had to go into communities and do these previews. I find it hard to believe that she would have been singled out by a whole lot of people for a bad performance, but it may be that they were recruiting a Kevin Costner audience and not a Whitney Houston audience, or not an African-American audience. I don't remember where the screenings were done for The Bodyguard. I just flat out don't remember. But if they've gone to the Magic Johnson theaters on Crenshaw, as opposed to wherever they went, I'll bet the Whitney Houston scores would have been through the roof. And maybe Kevin's wouldn't have been so great.
Well, speaking of bringing people in, apparently Kevin Costner brought in David Foster to produce on this picture.
Yeah, could be. He was in my building. He was, so I showed you where my office was when the window was broken. Remember I was talking about the, David Foster was, so if I'm sitting at my desk, he was up 1 and over 1. He was, I used to see David every day in the building.
David Foster was a huge influence on me when I was first getting started out. He was one of the first producers to really give me a bit of an education about starting out in this business. And I didn't even know that he'd passed on until I saw it at the Academy Awards when it was in memorandum.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I knew, because I saw it in the trades. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was really sad. But speaking of The Bodyguard, a couple.
He didn't give you the classic advice not to get into the business?
Never put your daughter on the stage.
You know what? I had gone when I was 14. I went to I attended a summer school program on filmmaking. It was you had to be committed to it, because it was 8:30 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon every day during our summer break. And so you had to show some real commitment to do that. And when that was finished, I had gone to, my father had run into a producer in a bar. This is how stuff works. And they were shooting in the village where I grew up, and they were using a church building that dated to the actual building was like the 1800s, 1890 or something like that. But the congregation had been in existence since 1690. And so they were using this church, and this conversation ensues with my father and this guy. And my father calls me and says, come up, and, I want you to meet somebody, and all this stuff. And he took me over to the set. I met Gary Merrill, was one of the stars of it, and Delphi Lawrence, a British actress who, like Raquel Welch really wanted this part, but Delphi Lawrence had beat her out. The only thing I'd ever seen Delphi Lawrence in was a Man from U.N.C.L.E. episode. And then I met the director. The director was from another town, a borough near where I grew up, but he had lived in Hollywood for a million years. And I told him, I was introduced to him as a young cinematographer, because I don't think the producer understood. I don't think my father understood what I was really interested in. So I'd met, so Richard Bartlett was the director, and he said, well, I understand that you're studying cinematography. And I said, no, I'm really trying to study directing. And he said, oh, go to medical school instead. Then you can cure your own ulcers.
But as we are getting to the point here, just a couple of quick fire ones to go off with on The Bodyguard so we can wrap up here. The Academy Awards ceremony was filmed at the Pantages Theatre, which me and Bill know very well from seeing the last night of Hamilton.
Yes.
And the guy who was the host for the Oscars on night was Robert Wuhrl, who you may remember as Alexander Knox from the first Batman movie. But did you know that Robert Wuhrl was the writer of Billy Crystal's jokes for the Oscars?
Yes.
Oh.
And he was Kevin's co-star in Bull Durham.
Yes, very true. Yeah. So, also,
when you check your WhatsApp, I sent you a picture. I cropped the picture I sent you earlier, where it's just the frolic room.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the frolic room. We
They
will
put a
get there one
bouncer
day.
on the door. They put a bouncer on the door. They had, when we went in, there was one bouncer. When we came out, there were two. They put bouncers on the doors. It's a very small place. And they put bouncers on the doors to keep the homeless out. The homeless are trying to go in there just to use the bathroom. But it's a really small sort of dive bar, but it's very show busy. I wish you and I had gone in there. I really wish we had gone in there when we saw Hamilton.
Next time. But The Bodyguard was the second highest grossing movie in the world in 1992, behind only Disney's Aladdin that was released that year. So realistically, this was the highest grossing live action movie in the world in 1992.
It was a good movie. I mean, all the stars aligned on that one.
And just to end this off, there was originally a Bodyguard sequel in the planning stages where Kevin Costner offered Princess Diana of Wales the role, which would be in the sequel of who he'd be protecting. She received the script the day before she died and never got to read it.
I know about the Princess Diana thing vaguely. I don't know any details, but I know that they were hoping against hope that they could get her to do it. They thought that that would be a coup of all time. She would have gotten it years before then, though. In 1997, Kevin was not riding so high unless he was trying to look for some way to redeem himself for The Postman. I just think the timing is off. I think any attempt to get the Princess of Wales on the picture would have happened a year or two before then. Right. It's great to frame it the way you did, you know, and wouldn't that be sort of kismet in a way? But I don't believe it.
Okay. Well, we've deep delved in a way into 1992. There were many other great films from Warner Brothers that were released that year. We couldn't talk about them all, otherwise we'd be here till 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And I can already see Steve starting to flag on his end.
I must be the only one that's not flagging. It's pretty late for you guys.
I can actually see it getting dark behind you.
I've been noticing that it's gone.
Yeah,
it started up very bright, and as you can find out in the last episode, and now it's got dark and dark and dark.
Well, I didn't have the lights on there. It was just the sunlight coming through, and now you can see the reflection of my fill light there. The sort of
Bill, always fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to come and relive some history with us, set the record straight in a number of instances, and share some stories that probably no one has ever heard before.
And revisit some of these movies that, I mean, there isn't one on here on your list. I kept score here. There isn't a single one on here I didn't like.
Well,
I mean, these were all good experiences for me. I don't have, there's not a single Malcolm X there.
No. Brilliant. I knew you were going to get that in. Or Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
I liked Memoirs of an Invisible Man. That was I got to tell you, we had a very early meeting with representatives from ILM, because we'd gone to ILM to do the package and everything, and they gave what I came away from the initial meeting with them. We met with them a few times, but the initial meeting with them, where I came away, I got the best lesson of my life. And that was, if you can shoot it practically, do it. If there's a way to do it in a practical way, do that. It's going to be way better than visual effects can ever do it. And that's and I've firmly held on to that belief for 30 years.
Oh.
And it's the John Carpenter movie no one ever remembers John Carpenter did. So
yeah. I went to see that one at the cinema as well.
Oh, poor guy.
Memoirs of Invisible Man?
Yep.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that was a 12. I went
The
in
thing
there
I remember the
mistakenly
most-
thinking it was going to be a funny Chevy Chase movie, but yeah.
Well, it kind of failed in that sense. But you know, Sam Neill made a really good villain.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's important to get really first class supporting cast in your movies. Daryl Hannah doesn't offer a whole lot. That was before, but she's not bad in it. But you know, but she was there only because she was you know, a nice looking woman and had a recognizable name and all that. I mean, I hate to be unfair to her, but you know, Splash, wasn't she great in Splash?
Yes.
But the movie just suffers because because Chevy Chase is in it, to tell you the truth. If you want to be honest about it, that's why the movie didn't do well.
We're getting into the dangerous territory here, Bill.
Yeah. and with that in mind, let's I think it's time to call it a day. Big thanks once again, Bill, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's always a pleasure to pick your brains and hear all those wonderful stories that you picked up over the years working in the film industry and particularly at Warner Brothers. I want to send a big thank you to you, Andy, for coming up with this idea, because it's always a good plan to just focus on something and deep dive. And I hope that you watching this have managed to get something out of it. If you're interested in following us, you can click the likes or the thumbs up. I don't even know what's going on with YouTube these days. I don't even think they know either. Follow us on there. You can also follow us on everything, basically. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Come join us on the LinkedIn page. It's our most successful page so far.
I think we've also got an Instagram, just to, you know.
Oh, cool.
Just find us anywhere. Come on, talk to us. We want your questions, you know.
Yeah, maybe they can suggest directions for you to go.
Yeah.
You know, some of the things.
You know. And be sure to catch me, Steve, and Bill fully deep diving into Fair Game. I'm sure if it's not
at some
available
point in the future,
we have to. It would be, what would be so cool would be to just, if we could do a group watch of that. You know, we could probably do it. I mean, Andrew and I have already talked about possibly getting a hold of a digital copy of that somewhere. It's not hard because it's on Vudu and Amazon, and you know, and then like running that on Zoom, and then you could have like an unlimited. Well, I don't think unlimited, but if you get the subscription, you get at least 100 people that can tune in and watch along with you. Have a watch party of it. That would be. I would love to see what I would like to just be an observer. Like, let me tune in with everybody else and kind of see what everyone's reaction to this is.
There is no way you would be able to watch that movie and not want to say some things about it.
Well, that's for the future. We need to work out exactly what the hell we're going to be doing with that one. For now, though, it is a goodbye from me.
Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again shortly.
Bye.